The night the dog woke him, the wind was loud. Not howling, screaming. Trees scraped the siding like fingers. And Boomer, the old K9 with cloudy eyes and scars on his ribs, wasn't barking to go out. He was growling. Low, primal. Then he sprinted past the bedroom door toward his daughter's room. Kyle hadn't moved that fast in years. He didn't know it yet, but the dog had smelled something that didn't belong. Something human. Something that would change everything. If you appreciate true human stories with suspense and heart, consider subscribing for more. Kyle Weller had lived in the hills of Mercer County most of his life. 3 miles past the last gas station, down a gravel road that hadn't been maintained since Bush was in office. He kept to himself. Retired from logging early. Bad shoulder, busted knee. Since the divorce, it was just him and 7-year-old Abby in a 1-story house that smelled like cedar and dust. He didn't have much to offer her. Just space, quiet, and the occasional pan of scrambled eggs with hot sauce. And now the dog, Boomer, a German shepherd with a graying snout, a black vest tucked in the cardboard box he'd come with, and a discharge paper from the County K9 unit. Kyle found him through a deputy he used to drink with. Said the dog was done working. Too old, too banged up. Most of them got put down if they didn't get plays. Kyle figured dog might be good for Abby. The day they picked him up, the handler warned him he doesn't warm up easy, and he doesn't forget a face. Boomer had scars along his left flank. Deep, pale grooves. Looked like wire. Or teeth when they brought him home. Boomer didn't sniff or explore. He went straight to the far corner of the living room and sat, spine straight, eyes locked on the front door, like he was waiting for someone to come back. Abby had tried to pet him. Boomer didn't flinch, but he didn't lean in either. "I think he's sad," she whispered that first night. "Maybe," Kyle said, rubbing her back. "But he's here now." By week 2, Boomer had started to follow Abby more. He'd lie under the kitchen table while she colored, tail thumping gently every time she laughed. He never barked, never whined, just watched. Kyle had dealt with enough animals in his life. Hunting dogs, rescue mutts, even a blind mule once, to know when something wasn't right. But Boomer wasn't wrong. Just on edge, like he was never really off duty. Once, late at night, Kyle stepped out back to piss and saw Boomer sitting by the edge of the tree line, staring into the dark like he heard something no human could. Another time, Abby tripped on the back steps and Boomer growled. Not at her, but at the stair rail. Low and sharp. Kyle had to kneel down, place a firm hand on the dog's chest. "It's okay," he said quietly. "She's okay." Boomer's breath was hot against his palm, but eventually the dog exhaled. Saturday. Something had happened to him. Something that never quite let go. October brought early frosts. Leaves curled and browned. Deer began coming down low, sniffing at the woodpile and scattering when Kyle opened the back door. The second Friday of the month, Kyle and Abby went to town. She wanted new pencils for school. He wanted to get out of his own head. At the general store, Abby ran into her old teacher, Miss Delaney, and started talking about Halloween costumes. Kyle wandered toward the bulletin board near the register. Most of it was junk, lost keys, a local boy selling firewood. But one paper stuck out, a printout, black and white photo, a man's face, blurry, taken from a camera angle too high, maybe a gas station security cam. "Have you seen this man?" Underneath it read, "Convicted felon, violation parole. Last seen in Pendleton County. May be dangerous. Do not approach. Call authorities." The man's eyes were small and sunken. A smirk cut across his jaw. Kyle didn't like the look of him. Didn't like the way the words "do not approach" were printed in bold. He tucked the memory of the poster away and didn't mention it to Abby. That night, the wind kicked up. Kyle had locked up early. Put Abby to bed with a nightlight and a few pages from Charlotte's Web. Boomer had stayed by the fireplace until Kyle turned in around 10. That's when the growl came. Not a bark, not a yip, a growl. It rolled through the hallway like thunder beneath the floorboards. Kyle sat up. "Boomer?" No answer. Then the claws, clicking down the hardwood, moving fast. The dog wasn't headed to the front door. He was headed down the hallway, toward Abby's room. Kyle's heart shot up into his throat. He launched out of bed, shoulder flaring from old damage. By the time he reached the door, Boomer was there, front paws braced, tail stiff, teeth bared. Something was rattling the screen outside the window. Not wind. Wait. Kyle could see the curtains shifting. Boomer snarled. One long, brutal sound that didn't belong in a house. Kyle opened the drawer, pulled out the Glock he hadn't touched since the divorce, and stepped in front of his daughter's bed. Abby was sitting up now, eyes wide, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Daddy? Sure. Kyle pointed the pistol at the window, waited. The curtain shifted again. Then silence. Boomer didn't move, didn't blink. Outside, something snapped. A twig, maybe. Then another. Retreating. Whatever had been there was gone now. Kyle didn't sleep the rest of the night. Boomer didn't leave Abby's room. Not until sunrise. The next morning, Kyle found something under the window. A print, half a boot, pressed into the dirt. Too deep to be accidental. Too clean to be old. Kyle stared at it for a long time. The police came 2 hours later. Deputy Ron Haskins took one look and muttered, "That's fresh." Kyle told him about the man on the poster. Haskins didn't deny it. Said they had eyes open for a few weeks now. But he's supposed to be for county's over. Supposed to be, Kyle said quietly. Boomer sat nearby, ears still up, watching the woods, not wagging his tail. The deputy leaned down and patted the dog's flank. "You've got a good one here." Kyle didn't respond. He just looked at Abby, sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes scanning the tree line. Boomer padded over to her, sat at her side, and didn't move. Abby stopped sleeping with the nightlight. That was the first change. She said it made her feel exposed, like something could see her. So Kyle unplugged it, moved it to the hall. Then she stopped sleeping in her bed, started curling up in the recliner near the fireplace. Boomer curled at her feet. She didn't say much about it, just mumbled that it felt safer here. Kyle didn't argue. He remembered what fear felt like when you were that small, how shadows took on shape, how silence felt like breath. But she wasn't imagining things. Someone had been at her window, and Kyle hadn't told her everything. Didn't tell her the print in the dirt was fresh enough to see the tread. Didn't tell her that 2 towns over, a woman had been found tied up in her shed with bruises across her ribs and a bite mark on her wrist. Didn't tell her that the man on the poster, Eddie Toller, had once broken into a house and hid in a child's closet for 6 hours before being caught. Boomer didn't know any of that, but he knew. Every night now, the dog would make a slow circuit of the house, nose to floor, ears perked, chest low. Then he'd return to Abby's side and lie flat, as if trying to disappear into floorboards. Saturday morning, Kyle checked the motion cameras he'd installed around the property after the incident. Nothing. Just squirrels. A deer. Once a cat. But something about the feed felt off. At 2:14 a.m., the camera facing the back tree line froze. Just a second or two. Just long enough to miss a frame. He leaned closer. The timestamp jumped. Then resumed. No other cameras skipped. He checked the battery. Full. No wind. No storm. Someone had blocked the feed. He got up, walked to the window overlooking the tree line, and scanned the woods. Too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Dead quiet. Even the birds were gone. Boomer was sitting by the fireplace again, eyes fixed on the back door. Abby was upstairs, drawing pictures. She'd started sketching Boomer more. In every one, the dog was bigger than life. His eyes were glowing. His teeth were always bared. That afternoon, Kyle took Abby into town for groceries. He locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and left the radio playing inside. A little noise to give the illusion of life. When they returned 2 hours later, Kyle noticed it immediately. The kitchen window latch. Unlocked. He always kept it sealed. Always. Boomer was at the door before he got open. The dog's back was stiff. Hackles raised. He sniffed the doorframe once, then growled. Kyle stepped inside with a grocery bag and looked around. Nothing was missing. Nothing out of place. But the scent in the air was off. A sourness. Sweat and something metallic. Boomer sniffed the linoleum floor. His claws clicked fast. He circled twice, then ran to the hallway. Abby stayed by the porch. "Don't come in yet," Kyle told her, voice tight. Boomer's growl came again, then a bark. Just one, loud and sharp. Kyle followed, heart in his throat. The bathroom door was cracked. Boomer stood at its edge, body low, front paw lifted. Kyle raised a pistol, swung the door open. Nothing, except the vent, screwed into the wall near the floor. He hadn't noticed it before. The vent grill was loose. Not torn off, just slightly unscrewed, like someone had reached into it. That night, Kyle didn't sleep. Abby curled beside Boomer on the couch. Kyle stayed in the kitchen with the lights off and his pistol in his lap. By 1:30 a.m., the wind had picked up again. By 2 o'clock, Boomer stood up, head tilted, nose flaring. Then he barked. Once. Kyle moved fast. The back camera feed was still live. He checked the screen. Nothing. Then Boomer ran. Not to the back door, to the crawl space hatch in the pantry. He barked again. Abby woke up screaming. Kyle yanked open the pantry door and saw the hatch already cracked open an inch. A smell rolled out, foul, wet like mildew and rust. Boomer shoved past him, claws tearing across the wooden floor. Then a thud. Kyle dropped to his knees and opened the hatch the rest of the way. Boomer was growling, body half inside the crawl space. Something moved in the dark. A scrape, then breath. Kyle didn't think. He fired into the floor. The sound shattered the silence. Boomer lunged. A yell. Human. Muffled. Then the sound of hands scrambling against dirt. "Stay upstairs," Kyle shouted to Abby. Boomer vanished fully into the crawl space. Kyle followed, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other. He slid down into the damp, shallow space beneath the house. Boomer's snarls echoed. Then silence. Then a rustle retreating. Kyle swung the light left, right, caught a glimpse of something crawling toward the wall. Then it was gone. A broken panel in the foundation, wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Gone, but not far. Kyle could feel it, and so could Boomer. The dog stared at the opening, chest heaving. He hadn't bitten. He hadn't caught. But he knew now. Someone had been inside the house, living under them, watching, waiting. The police came again, this time with dogs of their own. They confirmed it. A man had broken in, likely through the vent. He'd stayed in the crawl space for days, weeks maybe. Left food wrappers, cans, a small notebook. In it were drawings, crude, scratchy, of Abby, sleeping, of Kyle, cooking, of Boomer, teeth bared. No names, no notes, just pictures. Ron Haskins looked pale as he closed the notebook. "We think it's him. Eddie Toller. Slipped out of Pendleton 5 weeks ago. Been bouncing around a county line since." "Why us?" Kyle asked. Ron shook his head. Sometimes these guys fixate. He could have seen Abby in town. Or maybe he just liked the house. Wooded, isolated, no close neighbors. Boomer sat by Abby the whole time, eyes unblinking. The dog hadn't eaten since the night before. Wouldn't drink, wouldn't lie down. Something had triggered the soldier in him again, and he was back on duty. 2 nights later it happened. Just after 3 a.m., the motion sensor near the woodpile snapped on. Boomer was already up before the light came on. Kyle grabbed the pistol. He opened the front door and froze. Standing near the edge of the woods, backlit by the pale porch light, was him, Eddie Toller, gaunt, grinning, dirty jeans, a hammer in one hand. Kyle didn't yell, didn't warn, just raised a pistol and fired. Once. Missed. Eddie vanished into the trees. Boomer lunged, and this time Kyle didn't stop him. The dog tore across the clearing, fast despite age, rage in his throat. Abby screamed from the porch. "Daddy!" Kyle held her close. "You stay inside, no matter what." Gun raised, he followed the dog. The woods swallowed sound, but not for long, because what came next was a scream. Human, high and sharp, then silence, then a low whimper. Boomer's. Kyle ran, heart in his throat. The flashlight beam swung wildly until it hit something on the ground. Blood. And the hammer. Then Boomer, standing over Eddie Toller's body. Face torn, leg limp, but alive, and still growling. Eyes locked on the man who would never hurt another child again. Boomer was stitched up in the back of a vet tech Suburban, sedated but alive. Abby waited with him, her small hand resting on his good paw, her eyes wide but dry. She didn't say much, hadn't since the scream in the woods. Kyle stood under the hospital's floodlights, blood still on his shirt, talking to Sheriff Dwyer. Toller's body had been found 15 feet from the property line, jaw shattered, windpipe collapsed. Boomer had gone for the neck. Clean, precise, no hesitation. Guy had rope in his pocket, Dwyer said. Zip ties, too, and a rag soaked in something. Kyle didn't respond. The sheriff lit a cigarette, exhaled slowly. You sure you don't want to come into town for a while? We can set you up with a hotel. Guard on the room. Kyle shook his head. He was here for her. Not the house. Not me. Dwyer studied him for a long second, then nodded. Dog saved her. You both. Kyle glanced toward the Suburban. Boomer was sleeping now, chest rising slow and heavy. Yeah, Kyle said softly. He did. They buried the hammer. Not officially. Kyle didn't want it on the record. Didn't want it displayed in a case, labeled evidence. He wrapped it in an old towel, drove it 10 miles out past Elkhorn Ridge, and dug a hole near a tree that nobody visited. Boomer sat in the passenger seat the whole time, bandaged, stiff, quiet, watching. When Kyle finished covering the dirt, he looked up at the dog. You knew, he whispered. Didn't you? Boomer didn't move, didn't blink. The only sound was wind, threading through the trees. After that, Abby began drawing in color again. She went back to sleeping in her bed, though Boomer now slept curled up beneath it, his tail visible from the doorway. Kyle replaced every lock, reinforced the crawl space, installed a second set of cameras, this time with backup battery and hardwired feed. He didn't tell Abby that sometimes, when he was outside smoking, he'd still feel eyes on him from the woods. Didn't tell her that fear like this doesn't really go away. It just changes shape, becomes something quieter, something you learn to live with. The biggest change was in Boomer. He aged fast after the attack. Hair went from iron gray to soft white around his face. His hips stiffened. His eyes clouded more, but he stayed alert, always near Abby, always near the door. Kyle noticed he'd begun to limp more in the evenings, but he never once whined, never made a sound unless he needed to, just kept watch. And at night, when Kyle would check the locks one final time, he'd often find the dog already stationed, either by Abby's door or fireplace, eyes half shut, but ears always twitching at the slightest creak. A sentinel, even in sleep. Thanksgiving came, and Kyle invited no one. He cooked a roast chicken, not a turkey. Abby set the table with paper napkins and a mismatched set of silverware. She made a place for Boomer, too, set his bowl beside her chair, filled it with pieces of dark meat when Kyle wasn't looking. He earned it, she whispered. Kyle didn't argue. One night, about 3 weeks after the attack, Kyle got a knock at the door. Late, after 10, he opened it with a pistol holstered at his back. Sheriff Dwyer stood there with another man, broad, stiff-backed, wearing a county badge on his belt. FBI's involved now, Dwyer said. Turns out Toller had ties to a group moving through rural counties, breaking into homes, watching families. Sometimes they just take things. Other times, the agent handed Kyle a file. Photos, maps, a list of addresses. Toller had pages on your daughter. Timelines, drawings. There were others, for girls in West Virginia, one in Ohio. Kyle flipped through the file in silence. He was escalating, the agent added. Your dog likely prevented something horrific. Kyle looked up. He did more than that. He closed the file. Can you leave this with me? The agent nodded. Boomer appeared behind Kyle, silent as ever. The agent stepped back. Jesus, he muttered. Is that the dog? Dwyer smirked. Damn right it is. Boomer didn't bark, just stared. A week later, Boomer collapsed near the front porch. Just dropped. Kyle rushed out, knees slamming the wood, hands under the old dog's body. Boomer was breathing, but shallow. The vet said his heart was failing. Age damage, adrenaline trauma. He pushed too hard, she told Kyle gently. Most of them don't make it this long after retirement, especially not with what he's been through. They offered to put him down. Kyle refused. He brought him home, set a soft bed beside the fireplace. Abby lay next to him for hours, reading, sketching, singing old songs she barely remembered. Boomer's tail would twitch now and then, but mostly he slept. A few days later, just before dawn, Kyle woke to silence. Not the bad kind, the full kind. Heavy, final. He went to the living room and found Boomer still, peaceful, head tucked against Abby's sock. Gone. Kyle didn't cry right away. Just sat down on the floor beside the dog, put a hand on his ribs, felt the warmth that hadn't faded yet, and whispered, "Thank you." They buried Boomer under the big oak. Halfway down the hill, Abby drew the headstone. Kyle carved it into a piece of old timber. Boomer, K9, hero, friend. He didn't speak, but he heard everything. A week after the burial, Abby placed a worn-out stuffed rabbit beside the grave. "I sleep fine now," she whispered to the wind. "You can rest." Winter came hard. Frost on the inside of the windows. Ice clinging to every wire, every limb. But inside the house, it stayed warm. Abby smiled more. Drew again. Kyle slept with the bedroom door cracked open now, just wide enough to hear the creaks. Even without the dog, he still checked the locks every night. Still paused at the top of the stairs. Still listened. The fear hadn't left, but it no longer ruled him. It had been transformed into something heavier. Something that sat beside the fire with him each night. Not haunting, just there, like the memory of a dog that never stopped watching, never stopped guarding, and never once asked for thanks.